Okay, so welcome to this webinar, Unleash Your Creativity with Cartography and App Design, the first of our customer webinar series for 2024. We'll begin with a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and anyone registered for the webinar will receive the link to this in the follow-up email. We'll also be adding it to our website so you can find it alongside all our past webinars. The follow-up email will include a variety of resources that will help you put into practice what you've seen today. And we'll be doing a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So as I mentioned, we're hosting this on Slido. So please scan the QR code on the screen and add any questions throughout. We'll do our best to answer as many of these as possible. There'll also be a few polls on Slido towards the end of the webinar, so we'd really appreciate it if you can provide some feedback on today's session. I'm Catherine Clark, a consultant in the technical pre-sales team here at Esri UK, and I'm joined today by Ebony Webster, one of our graduate consultants who you'll hear from shortly. In today's webinar, we'll be delving into all things cartography, with tips and tricks for making engaging maps on ArcGIS Pro, a look at some of the newer cartographic tools within the map viewer, and finally, how you can utilize StoryMaps to create a compelling narrative alongside your maps. Our aspiration today is to inspire you to use some new techniques across ArcGIS to really take your cartography to the next level. But first, what do we actually mean when we talk about cartography? The Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the science or art of making or drawing maps. So unsurprisingly, it's all about maps. So instead, let's think about what defines a map. Often described as a symbolic representation of a place, a map presents information about the world in a simple visual way. And it's this information that you're presenting that determines which GIS techniques you'll need to use. We have many examples of visualization to draw inspiration from. From historic examples like William Smith's first geological map in 1815, to modern interpretations of that same data. Harry Beck's diagrammatic underground map of the 1930s was originally considered too radical, but this iconic design has endured into the tube map we see today. And it's not just the data on show. An organization's branding or ethos can also be shown through the mapping styles they deploy. From store locators to Ordnance Survey's instantly recognizable Explorer maps. As well as using specific brand colors, bespoke base maps and custom animations, like in this next example from English Heritage, can evoke a particular atmosphere and feeling, urging the audience to immerse themselves into the information being presented. But before you open up ArcGIS Pro or log into ArcGIS Online, it's important to consider several things. Firstly, who are your intended audience? Who are you creating the map for? Secondly, what is the goal or purpose of this map? And finally, how much resource do you have for the creation and any ongoing maintenance or management of the data within it? We have many tools within ArcGIS to help you create both maps and apps, and we'll show you some of these today to help you choose the right tool for the job. But before we head into the live demo, there is another important consideration to think about, and that's accessibility. Esri are committed to creating accessible products and services that conform to current software accessibility standards and guidelines. Today, we will give you some practical tips on things you can do to ensure your maps and apps are accessible to all, like using colorblind-friendly color ramps and ensuring you consider contrast. For more information, head to the Esri website where you can find accessibility conformance reports for all the core products, as well as blogs and articles to help you. And we'll provide the links to these in the follow-up resources too. So for the live demo today, Ebony and I will be working on 2 fictional mapping briefs, both with the same overall purpose, to encourage people to get outside and be active. So I'll hand over to Ebony to get us started with Project 1.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. As Catherine mentioned, I'm Ebony. I'm a graduate GIS consultant here at Esri UK, and I'm thrilled to be able to guide you through the captivating world of cartography in ArcGIS Pro today. So we've been given this brief by the Esri UK Council. They'd like us to create a series of static maps in ArcGIS Pro that includes England's national parks, national trails, and visitor centres along the way, not forgetting all important terrain data. So let's get stuck into ArcGIS Pro. So here I have a project on the go, and to save us some time, I've already gathered all of the data that we need, and I've paired that with the world imagery base map. So you'll see here on the left-hand side that we have our terrain data, which is localized raster imagery, which is readily available on the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. We also have our national parks layer, which again is from the Living Atlas, and our national trails data, which is a data product from the Natural England Open Data Portal. And last to be drawn, but certainly not least, is our visitor centre locations, which were fabricated by myself for the purpose of today's demo using 3 sample parks: the Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, and the North York Moors. So you might notice that on top of our base map, we only actually have 4 layers of data. You might be asking, Ebony, how on earth are you going to turn this into something that a cartographer wouldn't turn their nose up at? Because as it stands right now, this is the default symbology and it isn't the prettiest thing in the world. So let's get to work. So for the ease of the demo, I've separated our data into different maps. And this is so I can really clearly demonstrate how each layer is contributing to the final picture. So this begins with our raster imagery. So even as it stands, we're seeing some really nice patterns emerge from our national parks, which will eventually be our focus. But I really want to bring the organizational colors into this imagery. To help me with this, I ran the Hillshade tool, which sits within the raster functions catalog in ArcGIS. Yeah.
Sorry to stop you. I think your screen's frozen. Do you want to have a go at just turning it off and on again?
Yeah, sorry about that. There we go.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. So yeah, as we're seeing it right now, we're seeing some really nice patterns emerge from our national parks, and they'll eventually become our focus. But as I said, it's really nice to be able to bring some organizational colors into this imagery. So to help me with this, I ran the Hillshade tool, which sits within the raster functions catalog in ArcGIS Pro. And what we're essentially doing is splitting this layer into 3 parts. So the first one is our original state as imagery, which is what you're seeing right now. The second one I created is a traditional hillshade relief, which is from the south looking up north, and a multi-directional hillshade, which accounts for all positions of the sun. And whilst being less dramatic, it gives us a more 3D effect on our 2D map, which doesn't look too remarkable right now. But if I zoom in a touch, you'll see those elements really starting to shine through. So now we've done that, I want to come and talk about our color scheme. So you might remember the color scheme of our client that Catherine showed us at the beginning of the webinar, and we're going to use those colors to form our hillshade relief and create something really visually cool. So it starts in the symbology of our layer. And you'll see at the moment that we're in a grayscale. Now, I'm really happy with this continuous scale that we see here, as opposed to a more staccato scale like this one. But I really want to incorporate our branding into this. Now, for the purpose of time, I'm not going to dive into each hex code that I want to bring in, but I did just want to show how easy it is to bring organizational colors into raster data. So we're going to start by adding a few more checkpoints into our data, depending on the colors that we want to use. And you'll see that if I dive in more here, we can bring those exact hex codes in. And that continuous scale really nicely segues one color into another. I can also save this color ramp style, so any of the layers that I want to use this color ramp for is really easily selectable from the drop-down menu, which is great. So I'm going to go into a color scheme that I configured earlier, and this just includes our Esri UK Council colors. Now, those colors are sort of appropriately configured and really starting to come together. I can't help but notice it's looking a little bit orange, and I want to bring in another color to those low-lying areas to provide a more dramatic effects to the steeper reliefs and rolling hills. So to do this, I can really simply go back to our original terrain and go in and add a green to transparent low-lying fog. So this map is really starting to take shape now, but I remember that the brief specified for the highlighting of national park boundaries, which isn't really too clear right now. So let's add that next. So we're going to employ a cartographic technique now called masking, which is essentially adding a spotlight to our areas of focus. In this case, that's our national parks, and dimming the surrounding areas. So I'm going to call on two of our other layers that we saw earlier, our UK outline polygon and our national parks polygons. I've zoomed into the national parks in the north of England because this is where our area of focus is going to be. So this next tool can be explained as simply as your most basic math sum. We're going to take our UK polygon layer and subtract our national parks layer. And we get a national parks cutout layer. Now, as great as this is, it doesn't really match the theme that we're curating, so let's fix that. Again, I'm going to dig into the symbology of this panel, and here you'll see that we have a gallery with lots of polygon options. So just for a bit of context, the term style is sort of generic for any style used in ArcGIS Pro. These styles can be stored locally on your computer or in a portal such as ArcGIS Online as single files with the .stylx file extension. You can add them to any ArcGIS Pro project, just like I have done with these themes here. You'll see some that I've brought in, which is our felt, our hatcher, and our pirate styles. So although these are imported styles, they're easily available in the Living Atlas when you filter by desktop style. So as I was going through here and looking at what would be most appropriate for our customer, I really loved this land style from the pirate theme I imported from ArcGIS Online. So we're going to use that as a base. So although I have pinched this style from a pre-configured package, it's also a really good idea to start to create your own styles because these can be standardized throughout your organization by saving them in a style package. So as soon as I added it to the map, you'll see that someone has put a lot of work into creating that gradient on the edges and adding in those vintage effects, and we can really take advantage of that. So if I dig into the properties of this effect, you'll see here that there are a few different sublayers that make up that overlay. And whilst brown looks great for an old treasure map, I think our client might appreciate our efforts more if we added in one of their company colours. So I'm going to dive into the picture fill, which is our main brown cover that we're seeing on the screen. And I'm going to add one of our customer hex codes. And you'll see that's created a turquoise color in the preview. I'm also just going to do the same for this next blended outline layer. And once I apply that, you'll see that that's really starting to come together now. It's still kept that sort of rough edge, but we're bringing our company colours more so into this now. So let's take a look at those elements all together in one map. I think it's great that we can really take something simple, a few layers of raw data, and turn them into something that really fits the brief well provided by our client. So we know that we're working eventually towards a static map that can be printed out and maybe posted around the national park, but I think it would be great if we could add a 3D element to our map and include that in our layout to really show the hills and valleys of our national parks. Well, with one click of a button, I can actually turn this 2D map into a 3D scene using this convert tool up in the corner. And you'll see that that's immediately turned our 2D map into a 3D landscape. Now, the eager-eyed among you may notice that the national parks maybe doesn't have mountains as dramatic as this. However, with it being a static printout we're providing to our clients, I can create vertical exaggeration to really scale up those hills and make them more effective from a single viewpoint, which will be that static picture in our layout. I do just want to note here that larger data sets or rasters with smaller resolutions might take longer to draw and render, so it's just worth bearing that in mind when you are selecting your data. So now that we've seen we can really step through our landscape here, it's time to start thinking about our layout. So now we have our 2D and 3D maps. I have a basic layout here that I created earlier. And you'll notice that our 2D and 3D map frames are in there, and in context may help you understand why I opted to exaggerate that 3D landscape earlier, which looks great next to our title and some information about the national park. So I also remember from the brief that the client wants this for each national park, and I think it'd be just lovely if we could find a way to maybe automate this process and not have to repeat it 10 times, sort of doing it by hand. So this is where a process called map series comes in. With 2 clicks, I can actually replicate this layout for all our national parks, which you can see here. As we view these layouts, you'll see that despite including a map series has saved us a lot of work, national park shapes aren't a one-size-fits-all when it comes to presentation on a piece of paper. So map series can still give us the freedom to dive into our individual layouts and make those minor adjustments, such as resizing or repositioning the title and diving into our map to move those around. So there we have it, from raw default data and symbology to a highly effective, highly customized map layout that can be replicated throughout the map series. I'm going to hand back over to Catherine now to show us how we can integrate some great cartographic practices into ArcGIS Online. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Ebony. It's great to see the maps for Project 1 coming together. I'll just wait for my screen to show. Hopefully you can see that now. So I'm going to be looking at Project 2, which focuses on encouraging people to use and explore Glasgow's green spaces. The client needs a map that promotes green spaces in the city and encourages the public to visit using sustainable travel modes. And they've included some key objectives. They want to allow the public to view the maps on their mobile phone. So I know I need to create a public-facing web map. They also want to understand the best location for a new children's playground. This aspect of the brief will involve some analysis of demographic data. And finally, they'd like it to align with the organization's branding. So just like Ebony, I have a clear, specific color scheme to use. As Ebony mentioned, I'm going to use ArcGIS Online to complete this project. So I'll switch to my browser and get started. You can use the map viewer to create interactive web maps that you can share with a specific set of colleagues, your entire organization, or in this case, with the wider public. A web map consists of a base map, a set of data layers, an extent, a legend, and navigation tools to pan and zoom. And to configure your web map, you have 2 toolbars. The dark pane on the left-hand side is your contents pane, and this can be used to manage and view the map contents and work with the map. The light pane on the right-hand side is the settings toolbar, where you can access options for configuring and interacting with your map layers. I'm going to begin by selecting a suitable base map for this brief. I'm mapping an urban area, so some base maps will include a lot of information that I might not necessarily need in this map. On the other hand, a base map like the world imagery may not provide me with enough contextual information within the city. As well as the base maps you can see listed, you also at the bottom of the base maps pane have access to the Living Atlas, and I'm going to search for a base map within the Living Atlas to use today. I'm going to pick the human geography map and add that to my web map. Now I've chosen this for two reasons. Firstly, it has limited colours, so it's not going to compete with my layers for attention. And secondly, the human base map has the labels in a separate layer, so I can ensure these always draw on top of my data. Your organization's ArcGIS Online administrator can edit the list of base maps that appear in your base map pane. But if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, why don't you use the vector tile style editor to create your own custom style? And we'll include the link to this blog with more information on how to do this in the follow-up email. But back to my map, I've chosen my base map and now I need to decide what layers I want to show in my map. I've already added the Glasgow City Council boundary as well as the boundary of 10 green spaces within the city. I've extracted these from OS Open Greenspace, which is also available in the Living Atlas. Symbology options for your layers are found within the Styles menu. And in this example, I've chosen a simple orange background. I've found this color by searching the specific hex value, just like Ebony did in ArcGIS Pro, and I've added this to my saved colors along with the other organizations' brand colors to save me time. You can also search for RGB and HSV values to ensure you can match your organization's branding exactly for a consistent look and feel. I can edit that transparency, the outline width, and any other changes I want to make in that menu. When I zoom into a park, although my base map is very clear in areas of the city, within the actual park there isn't much detail. And I think some imagery would really add to this map to show users the footpaths and any other features that these parks have. I don't have any imagery data ready to go for this specific park, but luckily blend modes and layer effects will allow me to create something good using the world imagery layer. So I've added this from the Living Atlas. And as you can see, it provides some nice imagery of the park, but I don't want it showing in the rest of the city areas. In order to do this, I'm going to add a sketch layer to my map. I'm going to digitize a polygon around the boundary of this park. I'll just do this roughly as it's going to be blended in my final effect. I'll remove the transparency and change this polygon color to white. I now need to add a blend mode to this sketch layer, and the one I'm going to pick today is Destination Atop. Now, if I turn the imagery back on, you'll see this has had the effect of cropping the layer beneath it, which in this case is the world imagery. So I'm really starting to get the look I want here. Now, knowing which blend mode to use can be tricky, but I'd recommend the best way to learn is to just experiment with your layers. And to help you out, there is also a handy blend mode helper available in the Living Atlas. If you add this reference card to your map, it allows you to test all the different blend modes and see the effect different ones have on different colors. So do some experimenting and find out which blend mode works best for your data. Returning to my map, the final thing I want to do with this effect is edit the boundary so it fades more into the base map rather than having this distinct outline. So to do this, I need to add an effect to my map, and the one I'm going to choose is the bloom. I have options to adjust the strength and radius until I'm happy with the final look. So I've created this by applying a blend mode to the sketch layer for this park. But rather than repeating this manually for each park, I can use these existing green space boundaries that I already had. So to save time, I've gone ahead and done this in a separate map. As I zoom in, you will see the imagery appear for each park. I've also added a label so that when the base map switches to the imagery, you can still see which park you're looking at. Now, as I zoom back out, you'll notice this effect disappears. I've added a visibility scale to the grouped layers, creating this effect. There will always be a trade-off between increasing cartographic complexity and the performance of your map, especially if you're working with large data sets, so simple changes like this can help you address any performance issues. I've also collated some more data into this map, looking at the sustainable travel options in the city. Firstly, if I expand the cycling infrastructure group, I've added the Sustrans National Cycle Network into my map. Again, this is available in the Living Atlas, and chosen one of the brand colours for this line. And the second layer in my cycling infrastructure group is the location of cycle hire points. I've chosen to use a custom symbol for this, again, picking out one of those key brand colours. If I go into the Styles menu for this layer and open up the style options, I can upload custom symbols by going to the Uploaded Symbols menu in the drop-down. This allows me to add a JPEG, PNG, GIF, or SVG file in order to create exactly the symbol I'm looking for. Now, if I zoom in, you might notice that I've also applied aggregation to this layer, specifically clustering. This means that as I zoom out, my map's not going to get cluttered with loads of points, so it can be a really handy tip, especially when, again, working with large data sets. So I'll turn my cycling layers off and show you a couple more layers I've added. This is the railway lines and stations, again symbolised using those key organisation colours, and I think having this clear, plain base map really helps these layers stand out. So the other part of this brief was looking for the most suitable green space to build a new playground in. So I've begun mapping some demographic data using this layer from Glasgow City Council. Now, there's lots of information in the fields of this dataset, but the key one I'm interested in is the number of under 16s. I'll open up the Styles menu and have a look at options for displaying this data. I want to create a map that clearly displays which wards in the city have a high proportion of under 16s. At the moment, the data is just being displayed with a single symbol showing the boundary of each ward. So I need to add the under 16s field to begin using some of the smart mapping options. If the data you're mapping has lots of fields, you can quickly search for the one you're looking for. And the I button opens up the field information pane, which can be helpful to see some statistics for the data you're working with. So once this calculates, it would show me the minimum and maximum value and also whether there are any empty records, which can be helpful. I'll tick the field I want and click Add, and immediately Smart Mapping will begin giving me some options of how to display this data. The default one it's chosen is Counts and Amount Size, and the first thing to notice with this style is that although I have polygon data, points have been placed inside each polygon. You can begin exploring styles by clicking the Style Options button. The defaults are a great start, but you always need to apply your subject matter expertise to make sure your data is being displayed in the best way. In this style, the size of the point reflects the attribute value for the number of under 16s in each ward. Looking in the style options, I can select which theme I want to use. The default is high to low, but if I change this to above, I can immediately see the impact this has on my map. The above theme sets the handles of the histogram to the mean and the maximum value to help reduce the impact of outliers or extreme values. It's important to pay attention to the histogram. Take some time to work out what your map is now showing. The grey bars at the side represent the spread of data, and I can make manual adjustments to this if I want and see immediately the impact this has on the cartography. Each drawing style has its biases, strengths, and weaknesses, so it's important that you explore each option to find a suitable style for your map. I'll cancel these changes and show you some other techniques I've been experimenting with. The first one is counts and amounts, but using color now rather than size. So you can see that in this style, my data is displayed in polygons, and I can pick an appropriate color ramp in the style options. If I open up the drop-down, you can see I have options for light backgrounds, dark backgrounds, and at the bottom, the colorblind friendly options, which is what I've chosen today. As I've got a light base map, I've also chosen a light outline. Having subtle outlines really allows the visual patterns at work in your data to be the focus. Using this style, I can see the wards in the darkest green have the highest number of under 16s, so it's picking out some wards in the south and some in the northwest. Now I've only chosen to map one field so far, but I do also have the option to add another field, and this is what I've done in the final style I want to show you. Now, as well as the under 16s, I've added an additional field, the total population in the ward. Now I've got two fields, you can see there's different style options available to me. For example, the relationship style, predominant category, and the compare A to B, which is the one I've chosen. Now this is showing the number of under 16s as a percent of the total population in the ward. So this has been calculated automatically for me, even though I didn't already have this value as a field in my data. For this style, you only get the option of a diverging color ramp. And again, I've chosen a colorblind friendly scheme and a monochromatic one, as I'm only interested in emphasizing one end of the histogram where there are more under 16s, which is shown again in the darkest greens. Now, as I flick back between these two different layers, you can see actually they highlight very different areas of the city. Your cartographic choices can greatly alter the story your map is telling, so make sure you find the meaningful values in your data. Smart mapping allows you to freely explore new patterns and stories you didn't know were present in your data, and there are a lot of great resources out there to help you, including this story map collection, which will include in the follow-up resources with lots of useful tutorials to get you started. We'd encourage you to give each style a go and explore the relative merits of each one. So I'll now hand back over to Ebony, who's going to show us how we can tie all these mapping products together into a single application.
Thanks, Catherine. So sometimes your story goes beyond the boundaries of a map, which is why I wanted to show you ArcGIS StoryMaps today. Now, the thing that gives ArcGIS StoryMaps its unique appeal is not only its seamless integration with ArcGIS Online, but also its ability to adhere to the branding of your organization. So I wanted to draw a little bit of focus to the StoryMaps theme builder, which is the fourth tab on this panel on the right. So once we go in to create a new theme, we're given the theme builder launcher here. This is home to all your custom story map themes that you create. And here's where we can bring in all the content that we've created and begin to feed it into a wider story. So you'll see that this panel on the left-hand side has all our configurability options. And if we go into the colors, we're going to start by adding a background color, which is from our customer's provided color scheme. So you'll immediately see that we're given a warning that our story does not completely comply with accessibility standards for color blindness. If we take a bit of a further dive into that, you'll see that it's actually our caption colors that are throwing the warning. And we can really easily amend that by going into typography and changing our caption colors into a deeper black. You'll see that that warning disappears. So if we scroll a little bit further down, you'll see that branding extends even further when we consider our fonts. ArcGIS StoryMaps, in collaboration with Google, allows us to upload custom fonts, aligning our stories with the distinctive typographic elements for our brand. This attention to detail really enhances overall aesthetic and reinforces your brand recognition. And we can easily do that from the Add Google Fonts using an API key. If we keep scrolling down, you'll see that we're able to add a custom color to our buttons and shape, how quotations are formatted, and also how our section separators are displayed. No longer confined to generic templates, we can really start to tailor the appearance of our story to reflect the unique identity of our brand. And let's not forget that contrast checker, which I think is a really valuable tool to ensure that our stories are not just visually appealing, but also accessible to all. So creating your own branding is not just a possibility, it's actually a really straightforward process with ArcGIS StoryMaps. It's a matter of adding maps, incorporating the visuals, and telling the story in a way that is uniquely yours. The intuitive interface empowers users to become storytellers and really starts to bridge that gap between data and understanding. So now we've talked about custom themes and how bringing your maps, whether created in ArcGIS Pro like I showed earlier, or ArcGIS Online as Catherine has just demonstrated, let's bring those and take a walk through a story map that our clients have since made. So our customer asked for our maps to be part of a wider green initiative, and they've utilised those maps we made for them in StoryMaps. So let's have a look through what they've created. So at first glance, we can immediately see that custom color scheme coming through and that compatible text color, so they know that they're making their resources accessible for everyone. If we keep scrolling down, we can see Catherine's work in there, and we have this dynamic sidecar to add an extra dimension of context through our map. If we keep scrolling down, you'll see that they've invited us to explore the maps, and I think it'd be rude not to. So we can see that that mask has been really effective at drawing our focus into the areas of interest. If we continue to scroll, we can see the purpose of our map being accessed without actually having to leave StoryMaps, which is great. We can dive straight into that map. You'll see the travel layers that Catherine created earlier can be accessed right through these buttons. We can have a look at the options to travel, either by walking, we can see those bike layers, which aren't currently working at the moment. Sorry, I'm not sure why. But you can see that rail station coming through there. And we can see public transport connections with those rail lines becoming the focus of the map. This is a really effective way of allowing our users to see exactly what they need without the requirement to turn layers on and off and dig through the UI of ArcGIS Online. If we keep scrolling further down, lastly, we have our ArcGIS Pro layouts, which look really effective next to our client's custom color scheme, which is coming through in the story map. We also see a really great example use of story maps, which is to add in that additional context to help tell the wider story. We can see some more information about the parks, and they've spotlighted, and that lovely classic fluid movement through the story map. As a GIS consultant, I've witnessed firsthand how second-generation storytelling tools can transform mundane data into captivating narratives. Give your data the spotlight to unfold in vivid interactive tales, whether you're mapping climate change, historical events, or community initiatives like this one. Let your story be the bridge that connects people to places. I'm going to hand back over to Catherine to close out the webinar.
Thanks, Ebony. So now it's over to you. Using what we've shown you today, you'll be able to create high-quality maps on desktop or online, encourage data exploration by telling engaging, data-driven stories, just like Ebony's just shown, and share useful and informative maps with accessibility in mind, all with increased productivity, embracing the tips and tricks we've shared with you today. And remember, this webinar has been recorded and we'll provide the link in the follow-up resources if you want to refer back to anything you've seen. You can join us again on the 15th of February for our next webinar on ArcGIS field maps, so we hope to see you there. And we'll now jump into the live Q&A. So if you haven't already, please add any questions to Slido. You can see the details on screen. And just a reminder, we do have the polls on there too for you to provide your feedback on today's session. So I'll open up the questions and we can get started. So there's a question there about masking a base map, which hopefully Ebony and I both showed two different ways you can do that. So hopefully we've given you some ideas for that one.
I'll take the next question, Catherine, and this question says, when you use map series in ArcGIS Pro, how do you set the map extents? So it's really simple to set map extents when you're using map series, and this can be done in one of two ways. The first way is to set the map extents by bookmarks. So this is just creating bookmarks in your actual map before you go into the layout. And this can be done when you right-click on the layer and click Properties, or in the top bar, you can go and set bookmarks that way. The other way is to manually set the extents, which involves activating the map frame, and then you can dive through the layout straight into the map frame and set your extents that way.
We have another question on how do I add and configure labels to a point layer? So in ArcGIS Online, if you select the layer you want to add labels to, you can go into the label menu on the right-hand side settings pane. And there's also a labels menu in ArcGIS Pro as well. And there you can set up what field do you want to label your points by. It could also be an expression if you want to combine multiple fields. And there's all the settings there on text, color, font, etc. And also options to add a visibility scale to your labels, which can be a nice way to keep your map clear.
There's another question on here about a shortcut for bivariate choropath mapping in ArcGIS Online. There is a shortcut to doing this, and this is through the relationship mapping style, and it can compare two numeric attributes on the map, which involves sort of adding your point line or polygon feature service to the map, and then within the style, the change style layer option, you can select the two numeric attributes that you're interested in comparing. And smart mapping will sort of automatically recognize that you've selected two numbers, and you can select the kind of relationship that you want to compare those two layers.
So there's The next question is on the sketch style in Pro. Is that available to anybody? Ebony, do you want to answer that one? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, so all the styles that I showed today are available either through the Living Atlas or through the ArcGIS Online archive, which is available to anyone. And doing that in Pro, you just log into your portal, into the catalogue, and go through the Living Atlas or ArcGIS Online that way.
And so we've just about run out of time, but we'll try and answer a couple more quickly. There's a question about, is there a way to see all of your organization's branding settings in one place? So you can do things like adding your organization's colors to your saved colors or saving custom styles, like Ebony had done in Pro. Your ArcGIS organization administrator can also configure things like the base map that they want people to use, but it is more a case of, as individuals, you're choosing those correct colors.
Just a couple more then. So just one more about, is it possible to create a stationary print map directly in ArcGIS Online or only through ArcGIS Pro? Yes, so it is possible to create sort of a layout or stationary print map directly in ArcGIS Online. There's a print option on the black panel on the left-hand side of your screen, and you can put further configuration options into customizing that layout there.
So quickly, I'll just answer another one on, can you add a count total to the cluster pins? And yes, you can. You can configure labels when you aggregate point data. And then quickly, just another one, is it possible to rotate labels in ArcGIS Pro? And I believe this is. You can vary rotation using an attribute field, and you can find more about that in the documentation online. So do you want to go with one more, Ebony, and then we'll close it there?
Yes, sure. Let me just have a quick look through. It says one here that says, is there a way to share your organization's branding to all users within our organization? Yes, so I demonstrated earlier that you can save styles to configure them to be available in your dropdown, and this can be also shared with anyone in your ArcGIS Online organization. This will just involve, if you've created the style in ArcGIS Pro, this will involve just translating it into your online portal and then making that available to your organization through the normal sharing settings.
Thanks, Ebony, and thanks everyone again for joining. We hope to see you next time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.